how to put your hook in the vise correctly.
Here we have a basic vise. We have just a standard hook, trout size hook. A lot of times we've seen different types of videos or people coming into classes and they don't know necessarily how to do this. You'll see it a lot of times, people want to bury the whole hook point in there, so when you tie or wrap the thread on the hook, you don't hit that sharp point. Well, the problem is there's a lot of platform that you're going to tie on that's hidden back in the vise. So you want your hook to be out towards the end of the jaw, not too far down, and you want it to be level or parallel to your tying surface, or the table for this matter. So on this hook, it's got a flat shank. This is your tying platform. So putting the hook in the vise seems very simple, but you want to make sure that you don't have pretty much any more than up to the hook barb in the jaw, and you want a nice level platform with this style hook.
Keeping your extremities warm while fishing in freezing temperatures.
Good layering system starts with a base layer, okay? You want to have a base layer next to your skin, and I much prefer something very thin. Simms makes a lightweight base layer, and then Smart Wool makes a really nice all-season merino wool base layer, but that's what you want next to your skin. But a lot of people neglect to remember that you also need to have a base layer on your feet. I mean, I deal with a lot of people almost every day this time of year, chiming in, sending emails or giving us a call, and they say their feet are freezing and they're just putting on a wool sock, or worse yet, they're putting on 2 wool socks thinking that that's going to solve the problem, and it actually makes the problem worse. So you need to have a base layer for your foot as well. So you need to get yourself some liner socks, and Simms has a really, really nice mid-calf liner sock. They've just brought back into the line this year, and it's just a thin wicking layer that goes underneath your insulating socks. You do not need to wear 2 pairs of thick, heavy wool socks. That's going to completely defeat the purpose. You're going to be restricting blood flow to your foot by doing that, and you're gonna be made fun of because you're gonna be falling all over the place because you can't feel your feet.
An intro to steelhead fishing, Steelhead 101, episode 1.
What we call a sweet spot, an intersection of 3 different variables, 3 different conditions that really trigger these fish pushing in, and that really is the amount of flow. So we would call that CFS. Like any and all trout, they really like to be in water moving about 1 to 3 feet per second. And that's relative to the gradient of the river that you happen to be on. We're looking at turbidity, the overall clarity of the water, but we're also looking at temperature as well. So with that, when they can be caught, yes, that broader region is mid-fall to mid-spring, but there are optimal peaks in that when those 3 metrics tend to align with one another. So there are fishable conditions and there are some unfishable conditions. So what would a fishable condition be for you on Steelhead Alley?
So typically I'm looking for water temps ranging from the high 30s to mid to upper 40s, and that range is a pretty comfortable range for trout. These are trout. I'm looking for visibility in the water to be anything from kind of that 2 foot to 3 foot range. If you step out in the water and you can see your shoelaces about 2-3 feet down, perfect. There's a lot of fishable conditions. It could be dirtier. It could be a lot clearer. There's a wide variety of different conditions you get here on the Steelhead Alley, depending on what Dustin mentioned. Temperature, water flow, rain and snowmelt affect those.
And each angler and us guys have our own preference, our own sweet spot. So some guys are gonna have a preference for dirtier water, others gonna have a preference for cleaner water. Some are gonna like a higher flow, some are gonna like a lower flow. And so there's an edge to that condition that allows for a lot of wiggle room, a lot of play for you as the angler to get out there, experiment to see what works for you. But that at broader bookend, if you will, is what we're really looking for in terms of fishable, unfishable.
To break your wrist or not to break your wrist with Flip Pallet.
So I think we all agree that there are times in a fishing situation where we need to use the lever, which is the rod, more in the casting stroke, whether we're casting into the wind or whether we need to make a longer cast. We need to get the rod tip back. And whether you get it back using Lefty's system or some other system where you send your elbow back on a shelf like Lefty taught, you extend your arm back. The idea is to get the tip of the rod back so that you have a long casting stroke to help you achieve distance or cut into the wind. So you can do it by moving your arm back to get the rod tip back, or you could simply, after you form the loop on your back cast with the rod tip like this, you form the loop and then break your wrist backwards. Just break your wrist and see how far back my rod tip is at that point. And then when you come forward from there, there is a window through which the rod tip will pass where you want the rod tip to travel horizontally or as nearly horizontally as possible. And that's the point at which you form the forward loop. And then you relax your wrist forward and get the rod tip to go forward, which sets you up for the back cast again, where you come forward, form the loop, break your wrist, and get the rod tip back again, setting you up for the next forward cast. So that's how it sounds. This is how it loops. Form the loop, break your wrist back, come forward for the forward cast, and as the rod tip enters that window where it has the opportunity to move horizontally, you move it horizontally, stop it, and see the loop that forms? So if you do it at speed, it looks like this. Form the loop, break your rod tip back, and then do the same thing coming forward. Form the loop, break your wrist, form the loop, break your wrist, and it just gets the rod tip back. I could do the same thing by extending my arm back, which is a perfectly legitimate way to, you see a lot of people cast that way.
Blaine, we did an episode with Blaine Chocolate where he was talking about throwing his big musky flies and sinking lines, and he learned that elbow on a shelf, or Lefty called it the stab method. I think, if I'm not mistaken, Tim Rajeff, I think, also has a kind of a method of doing that. That's slightly different, but he's obviously maybe as good or better than both of us combined. I don't know. I'd love to be able to work with him sometime.
Yeah, me too. But I think everybody would agree that there is a lot of physics involved in any kind of cast. So my feeling on this breaking of the wrist is also this. The rod, of course, is a lever. Where I hold the rod with my hand is the fulcrum of that lever. And as I move the tip backwards and forwards, backwards, the more the fulcrum stays in one place horizontally, as opposed to moving the fulcrum way back and forth like this, the more tip speed I can achieve.
Correct.
By keeping the fulcrum in one place without working any harder. I still get that extra tip speed, which is line speed.
And it becomes much more efficient, especially when you're fishing from a boat. And it also, I think, allows you to be more accurate.
I wouldn't argue that, sure.
Because you're not moving your body at all. And it's the same concept as a catapult. And if you want that catapult to catapult a rock as far as it can go, you're going to bolt the base of the catapult to the ground. You wouldn't move the base of it. That would take away from, theoretically, the tip speed. You've also used the analogy of someone throwing a stone or throwing a baseball.
Sure. So if you were going to throw a ball from center field to home plate, you would not hold the ball here and throw it like that. You would take the ball as far back as you could using the lever, which is your arm, over the longest possible distance. And you release the ball while your hand is traveling horizontally, so that the trajectory of the ball is not a great big arc.
Right. Yeah. So again, so that's kind of the why. The when is after you have formed the loop, then you can relax the wrist. And this is what Jim Green showed in that Secrets of Fly Casting video. Form the loop when you stop the rod tip, and then you can relax your wrist. I think it's important, especially for beginning casters.
But it almost looks like one motion. You don't stop, and then
Right.
it's almost one motion.
Right. But
The loop forms. Yeah.
once the rod tip stops, the loop is formed. And I remember you taught me this many years ago. Once you stop that rod tip, the loop is formed, and it's like pulling a trigger on a gun. You're not going to stop the loop from going by relaxing your wrist.
No, it's gone. Yeah.
Now, there's other folks that talk about the fact that if you do break your wrist and you relax your rod back, well, it pulls this part of the loop open.
It won't. Here's what happens. As soon as the loop, the forward edge of the loop, passes your rod tip on the way to the target, nothing at that point can destroy or pull the bottom of the loop. No, you could throw the rod on the ground.
A lot of people have said that by doing that you destroy the loop. You open the loop. And the loop is really only the loop, the traveling part of the loop is at the farthest end. Otherwise, the line that's here coming off the rod tip is static. It's no longer moving. So the moving part is out at the far end of the loop. It
could be moving. It could be, you could be shooting it.
True.
It could be going forward, but
True.
but
But
it's not unrolling.
It's not unrolling.
Yeah.
That's where it is.
Yeah.
How to fix this really bad fly casting mistake.
Let's jump right in. All right, friends, our next question, hopefully it's an easy one, comes to us from Jonathan Lowry from Brandon, Mississippi. And Jonathan says, "Good evening. My name is Jonathan, and I'm trying to get into fly fishing as a guy from the deep south. We don't have many fly fishermen around me, so I feel like I'm learning in a vacuum. I've watched many of your YouTube videos, and they've helped me tremendously. That being said, I do have an issue that I can't seem to fix, aside from the numerous other issues I'm having." Well, that's not, Jonathan, it's not this kind of channel. Let's stick to the fly fishing issues. When I go to pull my line off the water for my upcast, my fly makes a horrendous glug, G-L-U-G, glug, as though I had a popper tied on. It's like my pickup is dragging the fly over the water before it actually picks up. Can you think of what I may be doing wrong in this instance? Well, Jonathan, just so happens I know exactly what you're doing, and this is very, very, very common. We see it all the time. And what you're doing, think of this. A fly cast should be just like an airplane taking off a runway. It should get going slowly, and it should gradually build up speed. And by the time it lifts off and you're going to apply the speed, well, at that time, most of your fly line and even a good portion of your leader, maybe just the tippet and the fly is left on the water. And by that time, it's an easy liftoff, and you will eliminate the glug from your cast. So what's happening is your airplane pilot he's on the intercom and he's saying, "Welcome aboard flight sync to and everybody, hold on, here we go." And they all have whiplash because he goes from 0 to 600. You're starting your cast and you're ripping it off the water. And that's what's causing that glug. Not to mention, my guess is you'll notice this, that you're spraying water. You're making all kinds of slurping and slooshing sounds as the line rips off the water. And you're alerting every fish for 30 yards, 50 yards that you're there doing what you're doing. Never let them know that you're leaving, and never let them know that you're coming. Except in the case of fishing carp on mulberries. Whole different thing. Carp on a mulberry, they have to hear it hit. They have to hear it plop in the water. go watch our Walker's Cay Chronicles or Carpin video series to learn more about that. So anyhow, Jonathan, we've got several videos on this. We did several on this with Flip Pallet. And, Flip being an instructor for almost 70 years of his life now, maybe, he's seen this a bunch. And what Flip says, Flip always used to say this to me. He used to say, Brian, why are you trying to cast the line? He said, you don't cast the line, just cast the leader and the fly. And go watch that video. It's either linked right here, and if you can't see that link right here, it's down in the description, as it always is. But Flip talks about, in that case, instead of trying to rip the line off the water and heave-ho the fly line, lift it up, get it going slowly like an airplane, and then you're just casting the tippet and the fly. And if you do it that way, you're going to eliminate all that ripping and sloshing and glurging and pulling your dry flies underwater as if they were a popper. Another thing that can really help you out in that situation is take some fly floating and something fairly viscous, fairly thick. The best I've found is this paste fly floating from High and Dry company. And just rub this on your fly line, and that's going to help it to float higher, and it's going to lift off the water a lot better. It's going to help prevent all that trouble that you're having lifting those flies off the water. So check it out, the paste fly floating from High and Dry.
How to whip finish a fly.
Finish. So, going to hold on to that bead, got the elbow pointed towards the hook point. I'm going to take this hook with the bobbin in my left hand. I'm going to take that hook and I'm going to stick it right in the middle of the gap of thread that I have there. Then I'm going to take this thread and I'm going to stick it over the top of the elbow. I'm going to start to move my hands away from each other. And as I do that, I'm going to slide my fingers off of that bead, which is going to make it flip around. The thing that I like to ask my students if they see is, does the thread make this number 4? It could be backwards, it could be whatever, but you want to see this number 4. Thread that's on the hook that goes up from the hook to the hook shank needs to be perpendicular, and that's actually what I'm wrapping. I'm wrapping the thread that is on the hook. So now I'm going to rotate, I'm going to pull the whip finish towards me. I'm going to rotate 1, 2, not holding too much tension on my thread, just enough. 3-turn whip finish is pretty standard. I'm going to lift the bottom end of that whip finish in the air. It's going to pop off this elbow and then slide it right out of there. At that point, that whip finish is done. I like to kind of unwrap it just a touch to lock it in. So we do 2 to 3 whip finishes if you have the room, and it does a great job of holding. So again, I'm going to do it real quick. Stab the hook into the thread, over top of the elbow, underneath. Hands go apart as I let go of that little bead on the whip finish. 1, 2, 3 turns. Tail the whip finish goes up, pops off the elbow, pull it nice and tight, and undo it off the hook. Give it a little turn like that. Then, if you have one of these loon whip finish with the little razor on the end, you can just touch it right there and it cuts your thread. So, simple. You might need to slow it down, watch it a few times, but this is the easiest way to take your time, get a mantra in your head of all the things that I was saying as you go through, and you will master the whip finish in no time.
Tracking your fly casts with Tim Rajeff.
Your face. So here's what tracking means. As I'm going to cast in that direction, as my hand moves forward, my hand should track on a straight line to the intended target. If that target is down there, or when I used to do a lot of distance competition, I'd aim up at a 13-degree angle and track in that direction. And when you do that, basically the implication is that the hand, the line, the rod tip follows the path of your hand. Here, hold this for a second.
Yes.
Imagine I'm casting without a rod, and my hand goes straight back, and then my hand goes straight forward. I can make a narrow loop. Straight back with my hand, straight back with the forward. That's what I imagine the rod tip's gonna do. Mm-hmm. So if my hand travels like I'm painting an igloo, what size loop do I get there? big, wide beginner loop. And that's not only what you and Flip were talking about in terms of where you stop and all this other stuff, it also is affected, and not too much on a short little flick cast like a trout fisherman. And this is where trout fishermen run into problems, is they've learned the feel of the cast, and then you bring them into a windy situation with an 8-weight line, you have to throw farther. Well, then what happens is your hand moves. It's called translation. So when your hand starts moving, you can be way back here, or even a smaller cast where my hand's only moving a foot or two. But the idea is your hand should move in a straight line. Ba-ba-da-ba. There's room for error, but more or less that has been my observations in the competition world championship level where you're throwing 200 feet, or when you guys are fishing the flats and it's windy. Nobody paints an igloo with the rod hand and tip and throws a narrow loop.
No.
But also, I'm gonna look at the camera here. Not only do you have to track with your hand horizontally, like Flip said, but you also have to track in the direction of the target so that you're not like curving to the side, like your hand starts behind you, goes way out, like you've touched the wall and come back in. Bueno?
So many people rotate their bodies. And by fly casting, I think one of the analogies that I often use in teaching is it's just like throwing a dart. And when you're throwing a dart, you don't rotate your body and then release the dart. You're never going to have any accuracy. For the utmost in accuracy and a nice tight loop that goes right over top of itself, it's really best to lock your body in position like you're doing right there. And it's the trajectory. Trajectory, I think is another word maybe, is tracking. If that's your target, then your trajectory is exactly such. If that's your target, your trajectory, and your hand and your thumb must follow.
If you push me in, I'm gonna come up and grab you from behind, okay? All right. Did you see, I almost fell in just now. I got so excited, I rocked the boat.
Yes.
Okay, so everybody cool with tracking? You know what we're talking about?
Yes.
Here's how you practice this. You stand at home along the wall of one of your rooms, and don't eat chocolate before you do this. But what I want you to do is imagine you're standing next to the wall and you drag your finger along the wall while you mimic a long cast. And in doing so, when you make your back cast, if your hand comes off the wall and then it ticks on the wall, and at the finish of your cast, your hand comes off the wall, that meant your hand didn't travel in a straight line the whole time. And if you watch any of you good casters, and my brother, world champion Steve, when he comes forward and he's throwing hard, his hand would just laser beam slide down an imaginary wall. So looking in front, looks like this. Your finger drags along the wall. Try that, everybody at home. Stick your finger up, drag it along an imaginary wall, whether it's an accuracy cast or a distance cast. Get used to that feel. There's another way that is a visual way, and that is just take the butt section of your rod, stand in front of the mirror, preferably with clothing on, and watch your hand as you see it in the reflection. And if your hand or the rod tip dips behind you and you lose that tracking, that straight plane and line, then that might open your loop up, and everything else could be good. Your timing could be good, your hat's in the right direction. All of this stuff's working for you. But if you don't track with your hand, I think you're gonna find your loop opens up.
Yes.
So that's tracking. 101, made easy. Bueno?
Excellent. Excellent. Thank you, Tim.
Easy.
Yeah. For something that really is so easy, there's a lot of misconception about it. There's a lot of, I think, misinformation about it. And
Track.
good Lord, how did you do that?
Well, if I double hard enough, I'm gonna nail you in the but you stand there, it'll be a good practice. Flip says don't let that line out of my hand. But tracking gets harder as you get longer. So as the stroke lengthens, my hand, and I've been doing this a little while, I just keep tracking and tracking until, thank you.
4 ways to finish a fly.
Probably the most popular is the whip finisher. And Ryan showed you how to use a whip finisher a couple weeks ago. That episode is probably linked right there. If you can't see it on your device, hit the description of the video below. But the whip finisher is fairly universal and fairly popular. This is the old Mattarelli style rotary whip finisher, and super easy. Making sure that you're wrapping back. It's just like butter, I tell you. The way that I have always finished, and you may have seen this in some of my fly tying videos, always just use a half hitch tool. And a half hitch tool is just like a truncated cone type thing. Okay, there's all kinds of versions of them. Dr. Slick sells some really nice brass and aluminum ones. A lot of tools, Dr. Slick tools, for example, have a half hitch tool on the back end of them. They're cheap and they're super easy. This is one that I use a lot. I like this. First of all, it fits neatly in my hand. Perfect size, and it has these replaceable, comes with a set of 3 different inserts, and each insert has a different size hole for a different size hook eye. So for example, this one would be too small for this particular hook, so I'll actually jump to that one's not even big enough, so let's jump to the biggest one. So you can just pop that right in real quickly. Take the half hitch tool and you go once and twice around with the thread. You start once and then go around again, and then slide that half hitch tool over the eye of the hook, and then you slide her down and tighten it up. I always do that twice. Once, twice. Slide it over the eye of the hook, and bada book, bada bing, you're finished. Remember, as with any knot, you always seat a knot before you trim it. Another way is finishing the fly with your fingers. I finish with my fingers a lot, especially say behind beadhead flies. And finishing with your fingers is really pretty easy. You're doing the same thing as a whip finish. And in the coming weeks, we're gonna show you exactly, we'll have a tutorial on exactly how to do this. But I just lay the pads of my fingers down, form an X there, or a number 4, I think as Ryan said. Put that X on the underside of the hook, twist, come over the eye. Twist, come over the eye. Twist, come over the eye. Again, we'll do that in detail so you can learn how to whip finish with your fingers. I finish with my fingers a lot. So this last technique is an old trick that Dave Whitlock taught us many, many years ago. You know, Dave loved Zap-A-Gap. I think he was one of the first people to introduce Zap-A-Gap to the fly tying world. And when he showed me this, I was just blown away. I was like, why didn't I think of that? You can also use the Loctite super glue, but in memory of Mr. Whitlock, we'll use the traditional Zap-A-Gap. All you're gonna do, you've seen me do this before. I'll do this on a lot of saltwater flies. I'll do this when I'm using heavier threads, and especially if I'm gonna put epoxy or a heavy cement over top of my thread wraps. This is just such an easy way to finish a fly. And you just take your Zap-A-Gap or your super glue, apply a thin thread, just kind of saturate your thread a little bit. Apply a thin layer of Zap-A-Gap to your thread, and 1, 2, 3, 4, just gobble up that entire length of thread that you just saturated with Zap-A-Gap. Come in and trim your thread, and like butter, there you go. Your fly is finished. I don't even do that twice. With half hitch, I do it twice. With whip finish, I'll do it twice. When I do it with my fingers, I'll do it twice. With this, just a thin thread of Zap-A-Gap, bump, bump, bump. Use up all the thread that was saturated with the cement, and off you go. Never had that one fail. In fact, I don't think I've ever had any of these methods fail. So first and foremost, most traditional, the whip finisher, half hitch tools, half hitch once, twice over the eye of the hook, and using your fingers, of course, you can do that. If you're stranded on a desert island, desert island? What's a desert island?
That's what they're called. You got it right.
Really? Yeah. Deserted island, isn't it? Oh, it's a desert island. Yeah.
It's a desert island.
Okay. Well, if you're stranded on a desert island with no fly tying tools, you can still finish a fly, no problems. And then last but not least, the old Dave Whitlock Zap-a-Gap trick. Let me say that again. The old Dave Whitlock Zap-a-Gap. I can't say it. The old Dave Whitlock Zap-a-Gap trick. There you go. Thin thread, boom, boom, boom. Off you go. So there you have it, friends. 4 ways to finish a fly. In the coming weeks, we'll talk further about the half hitch tools, and then we'll do a full tutorial so you can see up close and personal how to finish a fly using your fingers should you be stranded on a desert island. Much different than a desert island.
Letting the material control your thread with Tim Flagler.
Kind of a big one, and it can be used on a variety of flies, a variety of circumstances. I'm just going to get my thread started on the hook shank, and I use this a lot for the bodies of flies. It works particularly well for multi-stranded materials, such as peacock herl, which I'm going to use here, and pheasant tail fibers. I only have about 4, I guess, peacock herls here. And I want these, this isn't really a fly, we're just gonna make a body, and I want these to make a nice fluffy body. So what I do, I don't just start wrapping up the hook shank with them, I leave my tying thread right there and begin wrapping. Gotta watch out for the hook point, but I begin wrapping behind my tying thread. And what happens here is you have to basically pull up on the weight of the bobbin with every thread wrap. So the thread runs along the underside of the hook. And it does a couple of things by doing this. Probably most importantly, it keeps those multiple strands sandwiched nice and close together, so one doesn't run up the shank before the others. It also, because I'm dragging the flues by the tying thread, it makes for a very fluffy body on the fly. Really desirable for things like zug bugs or anything in the coachman family. So you can see just nice fluffy little body. I could put a wing on here. I could put a little soft tackle. And that's all there is to it. Just makes a nice, fluffy, put together body without one of the strands running up the hook before the other. And that's all there is to it, guys.
Setting the hook on trout with Ian Rudder.
The fish here in the Smokies, these wild trout, they grab the fly and spit it out faster than really any fish I've ever experienced, whether I've trout fished in the Rocky Mountains or Midwest or saltwater fish, whatever. And, one of the things about it is you have to be prepared, you have to be ready. Absolutely. And one of the things, before you even cast in there, I always tell people I would rather you be surprised nothing ate than be surprised that it happened. So you have to be like on the stick. Sometimes people are missing them. They'll say to me, am I just too fast? And that's, gosh, I wish that was the case.
Yeah, right.
Unfortunately, it's not. Especially if you're using a strike indicator or a dropper. If that indicator or dry fly has moved, the fish had the nymph. In fact, we're kind of a step behind already, and these fish don't hold on to it. So the instant that thing moves, you got to be on it. But after folks have missed a few, and I say you got to be faster, they tend to confuse faster with more powerful, and that's not really the case.
No.
Sometimes they'll even wind up, and that's not the case. You just kind of like want to be a mousetrap. I don't care how fast you are, you're going to miss a few. I miss a few. If I can get away with missing 1 in 4, I feel like I'm crushing it.
Yeah, right.
That's just how it is in these streams. So knowing you'll miss fish, knowing your fly will go sailing behind you, it's very important that hopefully you can set yourself up for a good missed cast. But no matter what, here in the forests of the Smoky Mountains, if you set up straight up, and I think like in your saltwater schools, you like to talk about trout setting.
Yeah, right.
It's kind of the classic trout set. We're not in Wyoming anymore, boys and girls. We're here in the woods. So You know, I kind of laugh sometimes when people set the hook and throw it in the trees. I'll say, you know, the ranger's going to check, make sure you got squirrel on that license too. You know, so let's throw out here and see what if I can tag one real fast. I've got a little dropper rig. I'll throw it right up there, see if anything happens. And I'm already getting ready. Oh,
There he
right
was.
there.
There he was.
And notice how I kind of set the hook in the horizontal.
Yeah.
There we go. It's a little guy. Come here, fella. Come here, buddy. He's a little one. And there's some of the fastest. There we go. Let's send him on his way. Very good.
So, you know, one of the things that I think it's even important, it's maybe so elementary to you and I, is to make sure that you're setting the hook in a downstream fashion.
Oh, so important, Brian. Yes, because the fish, they're looking up here, right? Let's kind of look at me. I'm looking this way. I go to eat. You don't want to pull it out of their mouth.
No, and if you go upstream, I mean, we're talking about this level of control.
That's right.
Within an inch. And if you go this way,
We're already doing this. If you go this way, you're throwing slack to them.
well, you're having to travel 6 foot before you tighten up, only to pull the fly away from the fish.
Absolutely.
Whereas if you're following them along and you set the hook this direction, it's just an inch to set the
That's
hook.
right. You know, the perfect inch.
The perfect
what
inch.
you like to talk about. So yeah, you only have that. And even, you know, as I kind of said earlier in another thing we did, almost a 1/4 inch. If you have that just like that, sometimes the fish on a dry fly will grab it and almost clothesline himself on the hook. So you don't have to do much. But the thing I really just wanted to be sure about is going that way, like you said,
Yeah.
and then keeping it low. And even if you hang it in a tree, which is going to happen at some point during the day, it's down here about eye level. It's where you can retrieve it.
Not up there.
Yeah, yeah. And, you know, maybe being a fly shop guy, maybe you want them to lose a few at a time.
Absolutely.
But no, we keep the frustration level down.
I teach in casting, I teach everybody to come forward too soon and crack the whip, you know, like Hank Patterson. Snap it. Snap it.
How to start your fly cast.
So the first thing, remember that you always have to have a leader on the end. We get that question a lot, but you have to have a leader or else the energy coming off the tip of your fly line has nowhere to go. So you must have a tapered leader. Doesn't really matter what it is, but you got to have a leader. And then I'm just going to pull off a bunch of fly line, pull off more than you think you need, pull off what you think you'll be using. And in my case, I'm going to pull off at least the length of the head. If you remember, on my fly line, which is the flip pallet high vis line from Cortland, the head or the fat part is orange and the running line transitions to white. Okay, so I'm going to pull off at least the head of the line, and let's review. I'm of course going to stretch my fly line on a regular basis. You're going to stretch on that given day what you think you're going to use, and every so now and then you're going to stretch the entire length of that line. But you just go through and stretch the line. It's just going to behave a lot better for you. And then of course, on a regular basis, again review, you're going to clean and dress your fly line. You're going to get yourself the Scientific Angler's fly line dressing and cleaning kit. I'm going to clean it with the sandpaper side. I'm going to put the dressing on there. I'm going to put the dressing on the spongy side, and I'm going to clean my fly line and dress my fly line on a regular basis. Now, of course, you don't want this line to be super sticky, so I'll squirt some of the dressing on there, rub it on liberally, then take one of the dry side of the sponge and kind of buff it off. So it's not super sticky, but it just keeps that fly line lubricated. So again, the Scientific Angler's fly line cleaning and dressing kit comes with the solution, and it comes with a cleaning pad. You'll see this one's well used, and you're going to scrape off all kinds of dirt. Clean your fly line on a regular basis. You're going to fish better, you'll cast better, and the fly line will last longer. And then last but not least, if you need a little extra lubrication, you can use this flip pallet special delivery, and you can spray it right onto your fly reel, and man, that line will just be slick as butter. When you see me fishing, especially on a boat, saltwater, really almost any time I'm fishing, flip pallet special delivery fly line treatment is very, very close at all times. Now, of course, when you go to string up a fly rod, you're gonna take the end of the fly line and double it up. And there it is. You're gonna take the end of the fly line and you're gonna double it up like this and bring it through the guides. You do not want to use the end of the leader, so double that up, bring that through, and then here comes the trick on easily getting all that line out, okay? When you get to the tip top, you do not need to pull it all the way out. You come an arm's length, okay? And don't worry, if your leader doesn't come outside the tip, it's not a big deal. Just come 1 arm's length, extend your arm, and then just make sure you don't lift the rod vertical. Keep it horizontal so that it doesn't come spiraling back and through. And now you're gonna use centrifugal force and all that line's gonna come right out in 1 forward cast, okay? Super, super easy. And look, that line is out. And now I'm ready to start practicing my cast, okay? If you're gonna fish, then you can just simply strip it right back in, tie on a fly, and do the same thing. Sweep it horizontally, centrifugal force, shoot, stopping the rod tip above eye level, and all that line will come right out.
2 tips for fly casting in tight spaces with Charity Rudder.
Teach people when we're on the river is to basically make your cast with your rod out in front of your body. So you know the basic 10 o'clock, 2 o'clock that is taught. So for me, I say lay that clock on the table. So now your 10 o'clock, 2 o'clock is on the table in front of you instead of beside you. So that way, when you're in a place like this, if you do 10 o'clock, 2 o'clock, you're throwing your rod into the trees, right?
Yeah.
If you do a sidearm, you can come under this as well. Same with the roll cast. There's so much overhang on the rivers here that the roll cast is probably one of the casts we use the most. And in a situation like this, where we've got all this current beside us, I've also used this on a boat with a roll cast. Just let the water pull your fly, get that little bit of tension on it, and if you'll point your rod that way. So get that little bit of tension on it, and the key to the roll cast is the pause. You have to pause that line so that it's no longer moving towards you after your cast before you bring it forward. So right here, I'm at a pause. I've got the current pulling my line, and I'm just gonna roll cast it straight ahead to reach into that little pocket right in front of us. So now I'm gonna make another one. Before I let it in the current, I pause, bring it forward again. It's basically just the front half
just a forward
of a cast.
right?
And your line is gonna follow what your rod tip does. So if I give my rod this little wind up like a regular cast, you see that that line goes back behind me. So that's the key, is that pause. So it's a lift, it's a pause, and a cross. And I can do the same thing from the side when we're talking about the sidearm cast. From the side, it's a pause and roll it across. So it's just the simple front half of your cast, really. Is that how you would describe a roll cast?
Your rod tip still needs to travel in a straight line path.
Absolutely.
Exactly pointed at the target.
Good point. Because the roll cast is called a roll, a lot of people feel like they have to draw a circle with their rod tip, and
no, there's so
that
many.
just throws a lot of extra slack in it.
There's so many people that teach the roll cast, and they tell you to slam it down to 9 o'clock. And what that does is create a big loop, and you're never going to have the accuracy that we need when we're fishing this type of situation. And then also, what's going to hit the water first? Your line is going to slap the water first.
What is trout setting and why does it matter?
Okay, so again, trout setting really refers to most of the time when you're stripping a fly and then boom, you come up like this, straight up with the rod. And once again, that hook is just going to do that. Much reduced chance that it's going to penetrate a fish's jaw. So instead of trout setting, a lot of times in saltwater fishing especially, okay, you're stripping. You don't want to move the rod at all, okay? In fact, a lot of our guides in the Bahamas, they're going to tell you strip, strip, and then long strip, okay? That's called a strip set. Again, I'm just strip, 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 and then I'm gonna make a long strip, and I don't move the rod at all. Do not move the rod. Many, many, many saltwater guides don't want you moving the rod whatsoever. In other cases, even if you're fishing in freshwater, you're fishing a dry fly, you're fishing a nymph, it's still not a good idea to come straight up with the rod. If you are going to use the rod to set the hook, try to stay below 10 or 2 on the clock face. Here I'm below 10 o'clock on the clock face, here I'm below 2 on the clock face. Try to set the hook to the side. That has a better chance of bringing the hook in a more parallel direction, a much higher percentage of penetration with that hook. Now there's one other kind of hook set, okay? For those of you that follow along, we teach some schools down in Florida with our good friend Flip Pallett, and Flip says that he doesn't even use the hook set. Flip actually will use his rod tip, but he doesn't lift up with his rod tip. He slams his rod tip down towards the water to set the hook. That's right, he slams his hook down. Because what happens when you slam the rod tip down? Does it actually go down? No, that rod tip goes up when you slam it down. And that is enough, he feels, to set the hook. So again, stay tuned. We're gonna get down, and it's one of the things that we're gonna cover with Flip here again in 2025 and talk about his hook set. But in general, for the most part, strip setting, whether you're on a muskie, a pike, even with bass fishing, for that matter, carp fishing, you don't want to lift that rod like this. You want to strip set and don't use the rod to set the hook. Just strip set to tighten up on that fish. If you do use the rod, just remember to stay below 10 and 2. And then when you're fighting a fish, same story. Keep it below 10 and 2. And put the bend in the butt of the rod, okay? You see the tip of my rod is almost straight and it's pointed right at the fish. Put the fight in the butt of the rod. That's how you fight a big fish. You don't do this Orvis guy, or I heard somebody say recently, the Statue of Liberty thing. That's ridiculous. The only time you're ever gonna do that is if you're trying to protect a super light tippet, or you're trying to get out of the way of some obstruction, a log or a stick in the water, what have you. Yeah. And then once you get around that obstruction, then you're going to come down again to the side below 10 or 2. But the only time to do this is if you're protecting light tippet. Otherwise, keep your rod down here and you'll be able to land a fish in no time. The tip of the rod is for casting or protecting light tippets. The butt of the rod is for fighting a fish.
Why Tenkara has its place in fly fishing with Ian Rudder.
You know, people think, oh, that's not fly fishing, or it's not cool enough, and you had a little story talking about somebody was asking you, or somebody was saying it was not their thing, and you had a little story.
That's right, yeah. So one of my good friends, probably 12 years ago, whenever this kind of came out and I just started getting into it, and I was like, man, this is pretty good. This is pretty interesting stuff. It's cool. It works great. And he kind of made some little, snarky comment about Tenkara. Yeah. And I said, I think it's pretty good. And he was a little embarrassed that he said, but he was just like, well, I know you really know your stuff in the mountain stream, so it must have something good to it, I guess. And I said, well, what's your problem with it? What do you know? And he said, well, it's just, kind of light. I don't, he couldn't quite verbalize it, but he just said, I think it's just too niche. It's just got too much of a, it's not good enough for this, that, and the other. And I said, oh, well, okay, I get that. I completely understand that. I said, and he was from Chattanooga, and I said, so when you fish on the Hiwassee tailwater, what rod do you use? And he said, well, a 5-weight. I said, yeah, so would I. I said, when you come up here and fish with me, what do you bring? He said, well, I like to bring my 7-foot 3-weight. And I said, as do a lot of folks. I said, didn't you go to Charleston for redfish recently? What did you take there? And he said, you know, an 8-weight. And I said, you went tarpon fishing last year? What? He said, well, we were using like a 10-weight. And I said, well, you know, sounds to me like you got a closet full of niche rods. and that's really what fly fishing is. We have all these different tools. Nobody, you know, so I hear, well, what if you hook a big fish? Well, I never hear anybody carrying a 7-foot 3-weight ask what they're going to do if they catch a big fish. You know, you're just as in much trouble with that as you are a 5-weight in these creeks, because there's boulders and rapids and the fish goes, you know, it's tough. So I don't think about the worst case scenario when I'm fly fishing.
Yeah. Well, it's just another tool in the toolbox.
Absolutely.
What is the saying goes? You can get through life with one socket wrench, but I'd rather have a whole set.
4 easy fly tying hacks that go a long way.
Or Crystal Flash. It works with both Crystal Flash and Flashabou, managing this stuff. Now, most of you know that if you take this out of the package, okay, and then you just leave it laying around, or you've got it, you put it in your kit. I mean, it becomes a mess. And then it gets all tangled up and knotted up and tangles with everything else. Well, I've got a little trick for you. I think we've shown this in a couple of videos, but anyways, I thought I'd show it to you here. In the package that it comes in, which is almost always a rectangular package like this, cut a little triangle out of that. Okay? Just cut a little triangle right out of the package. And eventually, once you use up one side of the hank, then you might have to come and make a cut on this side. And so now you get this position right here, and you've got that little triangle that you cut, and now you can just reach in with your scissor points, pull out the amount that you want, kind of smooth it out, and then trim it right off. And that keeps everything perfectly intact in the original packaging.
The reach cast, an effective fly casting method.
But let's step back to Spruce Creek here, and I'll show you a little bit about what I'm talking about. If you make a straight cast, so I've got a dry fly on, and for the most part, I want that dry fly to ride naturally with the current. And so if I make a perfectly straight cast like this, you're going to see that immediately the stream it grabs onto the butt section of my leader, it grabs onto my fly line, and that starts pulling, forms what's called a belly. And it immediately starts dragging my fly, which is going to be unnatural in most cases to the fish. Let me do that again, let out a little bit more line. Should be a little more dramatic. You see immediately that the current grabs my leader and starts to pull or skate that fly across the surface. So a reach cast, so one of the things you can do to combat that is to mend. And mending doesn't always do a perfect job. Mending can also disturb the water. The fish can feel the vibration of the fly line flying up in the air and landing back on the water. So instead of making a straight cast and then mending so that my line is upstream of the fly, now allowing it a natural drag-free drift, I'm going to literally put that mend in the air. So the fly is going to land there, and my leader and my fly line are going to land upstream. So truly now the first thing that the fish sees is the fly entering his window of opportunity. So I mend in the air, making sure that the fly is the first thing that's going to head downstream. That was a bad one, sorry. So I literally reached, that one was not good enough. There we go. And that way it takes it a minute or more for that line to catch up and now pull the fly. And I can then add some mends in there, but getting that reach cast in the first place so that the line and the butt section of my leader land upstream of the fly. Now, if the current were going that way, okay, right now the river's flowing that way, as you can see. If the current were going that way, I would do the opposite. Just make the line and leader go this way so that they land upstream, again, the river flowing that way. So a reach cast is executed by literally kind of pointing the fly where you want it to go, and then you're going to reach across your body, either across your body like this, and you sweep that line and the leader into position so that they land like that. Of course, I'm exaggerating my body movement a little bit so you can see it. So I call that the across the body reach cast, and my rod tip will almost wind up directly upstream. Okay? And then you see the leader and the fly line are upstream of the fly. The opposite is an outside reach cast where you're going to reach out. Okay? So you're reaching away from your body like this, almost extending your arm. But again, that would be if the current were flowing that way. So again, your rod tip winds up pointing upstream. So it takes a little bit of practice. It's almost like a Belgian cast where you just have continuous pull on the fly and you sweep it forward, but you're going to still want that little bit of punch with your thumb to get the fly to go to the target. Once you've punched with your thumb and that fly is heading where you want it, then you just sweep your rod and lay that line into position as such. There we go, that's a good one. And then of course, put the line under your index finger and follow along. And always talk to your drift. Make sure you're paying attention to your drift. There, I've got the line and the butt section of the leader upstream, and I'm making a good drift. So there's the outside reach cast, and then there's the across the body reach cast, and the outside reach cast where you reach outside of your body.